Are we recording the meeting? Can you, or do I have to figure
You
out?
can do that. You can hit the record button as the host.
Okay, it's recording. All right, here's the chair's statement. This meeting is being recorded. If any other person present are doing the same, they must notify the chairperson at this time. Okay, Jason. All righty. Okay, let's shoot into attendance. Butch Hawkins is present. Mayor, say aye.
Yeah.
Or present. Chief Strand.
He waved.
Aye. Carol Collins.
Here.
Jean Wall.
Here.
Amy McMahon.
Here.
Liz Gilman. Present. David Mascaratello. Present. Let's see, Katrina.
Here.
He's present. Ed Jarvis. Brian Hamill, was he going to be with us, Katrina? No, okay.
He was not.
All right. Let's see. Who else do we? Let's see. Peter MacGyver.
Present.
Present. And Greg Diefendorf.
Here.
And Laura Phelps.
Here.
And George Vanderlander.
Here.
Thank you, George. Okay, sorry about the 5 o'clock. I was trying to help Katrina and her group out a little bit, but some of this stuff really needs to get attacked kind of quickly. And one of them is the mechanical and heating systems for the living quarters and the office space and in that area. So in that event, I asked George and Carol if they would meet with CES, the engineering group, and Katrina yesterday, because the last time we visited this subject was back in March. So I wanted them to have a little more than a couple of minutes to kind of dive into it with the engineers and Katrina and wrap their heads around it. And because of their specialty, I felt that they could assist the board in helping us make a decision on some things when questions come up. And so it was a good meeting. So I just asked Katrina to frame why we need to. So there's 3 options. There's the bay for the living quarters in that area, and then there's 2 options for the apparatus bay, which will be done a little bit later. But the important part to move forward on, hopefully tonight, will be the heating structure for the living quarters office space in that area. Can you maybe just frame that for us a little bit, Katrina?
Sure. Yes. Thank you, Butch. So in our discussion with the engineers from CES, we went over their plan to meet the heating and ventilation requirements of the entire building, but focusing on what are the systems that we need to move forward with in terms of the design. As previously discussed in the meetings in March and perhaps even into April previously with the whole committee, we were talking at the time for the heating and cooling using the air source heat pumps. And I believe that this information was forwarded to the whole committee after yesterday's meeting. So I'm just going to read that as well so it's in the record. For heating and cooling, air source heat pumps serving the indoor variable refrigerant flow terminal units. These serve all the office, living, and meeting spaces. These are all electric per the city's direction. For the ventilation, there would be dedicated outdoor air units, and these are usually on the roof with heat pumps, energy recovery wheels, and MERV 13 filters, which are important for the cleanliness of the air to provide conditioned ventilated air to all the spaces. And again, this is all electric. And this part of the discussion is basically presented as this is what the design team understood from the committee previously and needs to move forward with now to keep on track for our schedule. And with this portion of it understood for the non-bay portions of it, that will help keep us on track. The other part of the equation is what we don't have a decision on yet from the group, and we can talk about it tonight. You can think about it, but we'll get to how we handle that in a moment. So for the base systems, we really need a confirmation from the group assembled here this evening that this is acceptable and we can move forward with it. So that's part one. Part two is repeating what we've said before about the apparatus bay areas for heating and cooling, and really heating and ventilation. The heating is provided through in-floor radiant heat for most of these spaces. Perhaps for the radio room, there might be a split ductless unit, but option one is using two gas-fired boilers, and this is using propane for fuel only in a backup situation. So this is where we're trying to understand from the estimator, which is our next step, taking this information on the two options, one using boilers with propane for fuel or using water heat pumps. That's the all electric option. So for the bay areas, we've got propane fired boilers as a backup versus all electric water heat pumps. The difference between the two of them is going to be cost, but it's also relative to the size of the generator. If you go with the propane fuel backup boilers on the one, that means your generator size can be decreased. And again, this is a discussion we'll have with the estimator versus the all electric option where you would have a larger generator. So the way that we're moving forward with this part two is to reiterate to the committee that these are the two options right now. We're not at a point to recommend one or the other because we do need to get those numbers. At least this is our professional opinion, is that we need to get the information from the estimators to be able to come back to the group and say, here's a cost relative to the other considerations. And I would invite George or Carol to add to this discussion because they were present at yesterday's meeting with CES.
Go ahead, Carol.
Well, Katrina did such a great job. I'm not sure what to add, but I would just say that, you know, our goal is to have a super energy efficient building that uses as little energy as possible, and doing it this way really is the best way to do it. And it's very similar to what's happening at the library, and it's so it's great that everybody's on board with this, and that we have had the time yesterday with the mechanical engineers to talk through any issues or concerns or explore our options. But as Katrina said, the for this part of the building, we'll wait to see with the bays once we have better sense of numbers, what the best way forward is there. But I believe we're all in agreement. George gets to go last, so he'll get the last word. But I think I'm hoping he'll say the same, that we're all in agreement, and that's what we're bringing to you all. Thank you.
Yeah, well, certainly I'm not against all electric. I mean, like you said, Carol, we're doing it at the library. But this is a 24/7 operation at the fire station. As I've said before, I'm old school. I really like boilers, especially some of the boilers today, like Lochinvar's, have been very reliable. And if we have to get a main computer board from Atlanta, I think you said where Mitsubishi is, and it's going to be 2 or 3 days to get it, I don't know what we do. So I realize having a boiler on site with propane probably won't look good to the city who wants to be fully electric, but I think we have to consider the reliability issue too. And I can get a boiler repaired a lot faster normally than I can a VRF system if the problem arises. There are more people that understand how to fix those things than they do how to fix a complicated VRF system. But I think the bottom line is the cost too. Yeah.
Thank you, George. And I also wanted to add to that discussion that we had yesterday. We were also looking at future proofing the station. So along with George's comments about how we're looking at maintenance of the systems down the road, that is part of the equation.
I just kind of want to add, I had a discussion yesterday with Neil Joyce, and he reminded me that this is a public bid process, and maybe you can highlight for us, I don't know, maybe Adam can, that we might not end up with the system that we actually think we're going to get right now based on a public bid scenario. And we hope we will, but if somebody comes in with a different system at a lower price, and we could have an issue there, but that's down the road. I think
Butch, can you explain more about what you're saying?
Yeah,
yeah, well, Neil said
we
under
have
the
Laura
public,
on here too.
yeah, under the public bidding process in Massachusetts, if somebody else comes in with another system that will do the job, the exact same job, he named the system, I forgot what it was. We might be in a catch-22 and have to go with a different kind of system. Go ahead, Carol.
I'm
does the
not
same
knowing the
thing.
name of the system, but I know that in my experience that when you go out to bid, you have very specific specifications on what equipment you are going to get with the minimum requirements and efficiencies. And I see Katrina nodding her head, so that's making me feel more secure that we should be able to avoid any kind of situation like that from arising. And again, I know, George, I'm glad you admit you're old school. I will agree with you there. But you know, we've had a lot of years now, including the engineer saying, and you know that was meant with love. You can't see me, but I'm that's what I meant. But you know, the engineer had said he's been using these systems and specifying them for over 15 years now. And in my experience working with contractors, they have very little issue with them. So, you know, we will still have a backup, or, you know, your concerns are valid there. But I think we, you know, we're getting to a place where I don't necessarily think from my experience that equipment wait times are going to be any longer. And it's just a matter of that specific equipment, whether or not it's gas fired or electric. But I just wanted to kind of touch on that too. That's all.
Well, Carol, they said that the systems they're putting in the office areas and so forth have been around for 15 years. The system they're putting in for the apparatus bays, first one is Lexington, and they think that's the first one in the country. And it's only been around for about 5 years.
That's the air to water, and I think they were talking about the heat pump hot water fired. So I don't think they were talking about air to water for this project, right, Katrina? Do you know?
No, it's not air to water, not for the main system, not for the living side.
And okay, the apparatus base too. I thought they were talking about the heat pump hot water fired.
But Butch, getting back to your point, and I experienced this with a library project recently. Like Carol said, the specifications have to call out exactly what we want, and if it's something different than what the specs say, then we can take exception to that. Now, if you're talking about they want to provide the same system, but instead of, let's say, Daikin VRF systems, they want to supply Mitsubishi, we have a say in that. For instance, the library submittals, they came back with a simplex fire detection system, and I said no. And so they have to go back and look at different systems. We have to be very careful about the contractors selecting systems that the engineers are more familiar with, maybe, but don't understand the maintenance costs and the liability the town has for taking on those systems. So we do have some some say there.
So
Perfect.
could I interject, Butch?
Sure, go ahead, Mayor.
A question I have is who handles that procurement process? Is it going to be Pacheco Ross or is it going to be the city of Greenfield? We have Laura on this meeting, who is our procurement officer, and she can also answer questions about how it works.
Right.
So who
So,
does it?
if I may try to
Go ahead.
answer that, it's a work in concert. Certainly, CMS along with Pacheco Ross, we're both looking at the submittals, but we would certainly want the city's input, like you're saying. Whether it's Laura or George or whomever, we need to have that input in part of our review process.
And Katrina, can I ask one thing? I've learned from the library project is I didn't get to see what was being submitted until the submittals were out there. They were using Procore as a software to show everything. Is there a way we can see ahead of time before the vendors get too far down the road as to what they're submitting to say yes or no, that's what we want?
I would like Neil or Roger to have answered that question a little bit more.
Yeah.
But certainly, we can have the process set up so that when the submittal is issued to us by the contractor, it goes to you.
Okay, good.
That is something we can
Absolutely.
arrange. Yes.
Okay. Because I was kind of late in the process and I didn't get to, everything had already been submitted and I didn't get a chance to talk about it.
I'd
Okay,
like
thank
us
you.
not to forget that.
I'm writing notes.
We've
And George,
talked about that.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna just say we have that on the forefront, like to have IT and central maintenance and things like that being involved sooner in the process to make sure, because there's a lot of experience there that can help us make good choices going forward. So we want to make sure that that's a very inclusive process. So I have
Thank
an
you,
eye on
Laura. I
that
was about to say, not to forget us.
Absolutely.
Go ahead,
Right,
It's going
Katrina.
to take all of us to make this happen.
Right, right. And I would like to add that certainly when we are writing the specifications in cases where we have to have the three minimum manufacturers, and we say this is our basis of design, et cetera, you absolutely have a voice in that process and should be looking at our specifications so that we are on the right track. And if you say you don't want any simplex, we won't write them in if we can help it. That's where we need to understand from our engineers and suppliers of materials what are those equivalents that are out there so that we're meeting the proper requirements of the Commonwealth.
Good. Thank you, Katrina.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Mayor.
I would just like to appreciate what George said because I'm there too. I'm a little old school. I'm a little concerned about all electric anything. It's cheap today, as we all know, if we've been around since the 70s, which I have. It may not be cheap tomorrow. So I'm a little, unless we get those solar panels up there, I'm a little concerned about anything all electric with, as we see now, even the supply chain issues with, I mean, I don't anticipate those going on forever, but getting computer parts and electrical parts and things that he's talking about, we might find ourselves down the road in something of a pickle without a backup system.
Amy?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to having owned Mesa for 20 years on Main Street. The electrical lines are buried underneath, and we've lost electricity about 3 or 4 times. I've actually texted Chief Strahan in a panic and then had to move all of my perishables to Foster's. And what happens is if there's any flooding situation, they have to shut down the electrical lines underneath. And so in terms of, the fire station needing to be online 24/7, I have serious concerns about it being completely dependent upon the electricity. And I understand that there's a generator plan, but it just seems to me like the propane backup is a better plan.
Well, Amy, we'd still need electricity to run the boiler. So
Okay.
that's an issue, but certainly it doesn't take as much electricity as it would a VRF system. Um, and that's why the generator is in place.
But it would still be like the propane plus like an electric generator and not just an electric generator trying to power the fire station. And like I think the longest outage we've had is about 12 hours.
Mm.
Mhm.
George?
That was a question.
Again, I go back to the fact that we have to depend on that generator to take care of any outages that we have. So whether it's 2 or 12 or 3 days, the generator will support the building.
Chief and Greg.
Yeah, so thank you. I haven't drawn a conclusion or an opinion either way yet, but I just wanted to throw a couple things out there. From experience at the old firehouse, I never ran out of power. I did run out of oil several times. So
No.
the flip can be said either way. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The more power we're going to have, obviously the larger generator we're going to need. So there is that to balance out as well. I am intrigued though, if somebody could tell me if this technology about heat is currently being used within the city at certain buildings. I know it's being planned for the library project. But is it currently used within the city and is it currently reliable?
Well, Bob, the whole town hall is supported by a VRF system right now. Now we have a boiler backup on gas, but it's been a very reliable system, and it's gone down to less than 10 degrees outside and still supported the building well. So I can't say it's an unreliable system, and we've had good luck with it as far as maintenance goes.
So
But
if I could
if we
follow
need
up on that,
parts for that, it could be a problem.
I believe that the community center is also this model, is it
Community
not?
center is all electric. You're right, and we've had good luck with it as well.
So I guess my question about the redundancy would be, we're talking about a redundant, complete separate system. Is there redundancy built into a standalone electric system? i.e., if a section fails, is it a catastrophic failure that takes the whole building offline? Or are there sections that would be taken offline if we lost that? And again, we've never, knock on wood, have lost power.
At City Hall, we have a backup system. At the community center, we do not.
Carol?
I just want to add that we also have an all-electric heat pump system at the new DPW building. And I'm hoping George isn't mentioning it because it's been so problem-free that you've never had to do anything there. But when there is a failure, each head services usually like an enclosed room or a certain square footage. So if you did have one head that went out, it would sort of be like closing a vent in a room. So it would definitely be cooler. But again, I think what we're seeing is we now have DPW building or office building, the John Zahn Center, the City Hall, which actually reused half of the system from the Davis Street admin building and then supplemented it in an old brick building. And yeah, we don't have the library online yet, but all of those without problems, 2 new construction and 2 one retrofit, I think speaks volumes. One other thing I just want to say too, in terms of the kind of usage and looking at historical context, is because the city hall was already in operation, it had a gas-fired steam system that George mentioned. That's our backup if we need it. I think we only used maybe $3 worth of gas last year because it has been so reliable. But the way I measure usage is by, and we talked about this a little bit when we had the first presentation by the engineers, but it's energy use intensity. So it's looking at how much fuel you'll need per square foot, so you can equalize things. So before we put in the VRF system in City Hall, it was 70. And now with this system, it's 38. So it's been cut almost in half, the energy usage, because these systems are so much more efficient. So I just want to throw that in as a testament that this is really the best thing that we can do outside of other systems that are even more expensive. But this is the lowest. The all electric is the lowest upfront cost also. And I see a hand. I'll stop.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate my question, and I don't know if somebody has an answer to it. Are there redundancy built within the standalone electric system where you won't have these catastrophic failures that we're worried about? I know on our old oil system that we had a computer board that controlled the oil fired furnace that blew, and we lost for several days. So I think we just need to put things in perspective. And before I make a decision, I'm just curious how the redundancy is with a standalone electrical system without having a full redundant backup boiler and things. Thank you.
Well, just a little clarification, and Carol, I agree with everything you said, except that if you have the evaporator head in a room and that fails, you're right. You still have the other ones working, but everything goes back to that condensing unit outside, and that's where the brains are. And if you lose something in there, you lose the whole system. So I'm not saying that, and again, I agree with Carol. Everything's been very reliable. We've had that system at Town Hall for what, 3-4 years now? 4 years, okay. And it's done well. And I've had no problem at the community center. But there's no backup. If something happens and we need a main board somewhere, that could be a real problem.
Sure, Carol.
Well, again, I just want to add, I thought I was trying to answer your question, but I guess I really wasn't, Chief. And I don't know if Katrina knows the answer, but that could be something we talk to the engineers about so that you can feel confident that you have something that will work. But I think, what I'm hearing is that these are highly reliable, but yeah, anything can happen. And I guess we have to think of every situation, but there hasn't been one yet. Knock wood.
Just a question for Katrina. Can we spec out spare critical parts so that we have them on hand?
I believe that is an option, Butch. And that's certainly something that we can talk about in further discussions. I think the point for tonight is to understand from the committee that yes, we're committing to this is the living side of the building that we're doing with this system. That's the decision that we're looking for as a design team so we can move forward with it and keep our schedule. And the other part is we will come back once we've got numbers from the estimator for the bay portion.
Yeah, but I think that's a great idea. If we go all electric, then we really should look at critical spare parts and say we'll stock these, and they're not cheap, but we stock them, and if we need them, we'll call a contractor in and say, put this board in. We've already got it, so that may make sense.
Yep.
Greg had a question.
Yeah. So my understanding is that the backup system, if it's propane, it's only going to run when the power's off. And part of that, the generator could be smaller. So even if we go with all electric, we're still going to have a generator, and that generator is going to run on oil or propane.
Diesel.
So the only time the propane boilers are going to run is when we don't have power, which we're going to use hydrocarbons to power it anyway.
True.
So either way we go, we're going to use fossil fuels when we have no power. And also, I might be wrong, but I thought the backup system was supposed to heat the whole building, not just the apparatus floor. So I feel like that changed, or no?
No, and if I may clarify just a little bit, Greg.
Yeah.
The backup system provided by or the backup energy provided by the generator is meant for the entire building.
No,
It's just
yeah,
in terms of how the bays are covered for their heat, which is inflow radiant, those gas-fired boilers would be used.
okay. All right, maybe I just misunderstood in March. Thank you.
Okay, Fernando?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that whatever system we end up going with, for the server room, I need to be able to control not just the temperature, but also the humidity in that room. If it's too dry, you get static. If it's too wet, well, you don't want anything too wet with your computers. That was it.
Thank you.
Yes.
That is something that we do take into account in terms of the design, but I'll make sure that we bring that back up in the next discussion.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any more questions on at least the living space and office space system? Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, Katrina, George talked about the condensing unit outside and how everything goes back to that unit, which I understand. But how many of those condensing units are we talking about? And is there a way in the design to kind of stagger the feeds that come off of that unit? So if one were to die, we're not talking about a whole section of the building. It would be kind of a shared load amongst the other condensing units.
Okay, I can't answer that directly, Peter, because I'm not the mechanical engineer.
I can.
Okay, if you could jump in there, George.
Yeah, so Peter, you have a condensing unit for so many evaporator heads that go in a room. Okay, and they go through a manifold system that feeds all these evaporator heads. You don't have, if one condenser fails, the unit that feeds those heads fail with it. So, and I don't know how many condensers we're going to have. We have 36 evaporator heads in offices on 2 condensers outside, but they're totally independent. One handles the north side of the building, one handles the south side. So if the north side unit goes down, all those units go down with it. There's no way to switch over to the other unit.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions by anyone? Okay, I think we need a motion. And the motion would be, Katrina, to give you authorization to move forward with explain the design. You would?
The base systems for the non-bay portion of the building using VRF units and the dedicated outdoor air unit for ventilation in all the non-bay areas.
Okay, is the motion for that? Someone? Mayor, yes. Is there a second? You're
Second.
you're
I'll
muted.
second.
Sorry, I was on mute, so move.
Okay, is there a second?
Second, Carol.
Carol? Okay, any further discussion on the matter? Okay, let's have a little roll call for the vote. Which votes yes? Mayor?
Yes,
Chief?
I am sorry, I would like clarification on what we're voting on with this.
We're only, go ahead, Katrina.
If you want me to.
Yeah,
This
go ahead.
is just to authorize the design team to move forward with the VRF systems discussed for the non-bay areas. The bay areas, we're not asking for a vote on yet because we're waiting for pricing information from the estimator. But for our design team to move forward and keep on track, we need to make sure that we are not changing from the design that we've discussed and gotten all the feedback from for the VRF systems and the outdoor air unit with heat pump for the living side of the building. That's what we're looking for.
Would this be an opportunity to add a friendly amendment to that?
Um,
What my suggestion would be, I'm sorry that I missed this before it was a second, but what my friendly amendment would be with that is that I would authorize that provided we see evidence enough that there is redundancy within that comes back, rather than having say yes to it and then it comes back and there's a single point of failure that knocks the whole fire station offline. I don't know if we can do that. I'm sorry if that's out of line. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd say we're in the middle of a vote. We either voted up or down, and then we could amend the vote afterwards if folks
And I
so
will vote
choose.
no.
Okay.
For
Gene?
the reason to vote no is to bring it back up and to amend the vote. Thank you.
Sure.
But Does,
Jane?
does it work if the friendly amendment is accepted by those who made the initial?
It does.
Okay, we need a motion for the friendly amendment.
So I will so move that the vote is positive, that a positive vote is contingent on proof coming back that there is built-in redundancy to the VR system.
Okay. Is there a second? Is there any further discussion on the friendly amendment? Go ahead, Carol.
I'm not sure if this is okay to ask at this point, but my understanding is, and I don't know, Katrina, if you can fill in on this, but we would have at least 6 condensing units there, something like that in the living units. So, Chief, I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question, but if one unit went down, that would take out a sixth of the building. Then we have a backup generator, right? Can that be used to supplement?
My concern is by giving just a general yes vote on this, is that I would like to send a clear message to the designers that this system is acceptable. However, there needs to be robust redundancy put into the design phase of it. Rather than just saying we're accepting this and like George has concerns about a single point of failure and whatnot. I believe that instructing our engineers and our architect firm with clear instructions on, okay, we're not doing a backup boiler, but what are the backup redundancies that can be put in? That's all. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I think it would alleviate my concern.
Okay. Anyone else on the friendly amendment? Okay. We should start again. So we're voting for the system with a friendly amendment to have a redundant system included, as I understand it. So I would vote yes. Mayor?
Yes.
Chief?
Yes.
Carol? Carol?
I'm sorry. Can you come back to me, please?
Okay. Jean?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Carol?
Oh man, I wish there were more people here. I'm
Motion
just
carries.
nervous that with this language, we're now saying, oh, let's build a whole new secondary heating system. And, when you talk about redundancy, that's usually what it means. And so that's going to drive costs. I don't know. And now it sounds like that's going to be required, that we're not getting a heating system that's all electric without an additional redundant system. So I guess I'm more on board if we can just, I think the wording the chief used initially was to make sure that there were basically that the building was not going to be without power, right? That's really the goal, is that you're not without.
Yeah, if I can make a comment, I think back to what Butch said earlier, I think, and we don't normally do this in a project, but probably should, the library. But Katrina, we probably need to really get with the engineers and scrutinize the spare parts we need for these units if we go all electric, and make sure it could be $5,000 or $10,000 worth of spare parts we need to keep on hand. But if the chief wants that redundancy, we should have them ready to go. And I think that would be the best way to go, best way to handle this.
Okay. Okay. Well, the motion passed, carried. And so that concludes this meeting. The next two meetings, Monday the 15th and the 18th, are both at 4 o'clock. Monday's meeting will be on the design changes for the front of the building. And then our regular meeting, I'm sure we won't get through it all there, and our regular meeting will be on the 18th. Okay, a motion to adjourn.
So move, Jean.
Second. Okay, I'll say aye, Mayor.
Yes. And I'm gonna
Yes.
say goodbye. I have to leave.
Okay, yeah, Chief,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
Bye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.